Hi, this is Aaron with the 1A coming to you from Just 1A, and I'm here with Tán, the former co-founder and COO of Fiveable, and who's now focused on no-code slash low-code product support. How's it going, Tán?
Hey Aaron, good. So my name is Tan. I'm now focused on no code and low code development. So what that means is I'll help with the product teams, um, kind of contributions and how I can help reduce the amount of resources we're spending all over the place, and seeing if we can get to MVP solutions more quickly, more efficiently, and also just stepping in to provide like design support and also just like support like with customers. And so at Fiveable. Fiveable is a kind of small but rapidly growing ed tech startup. We're focused on supporting AP students um, with their AP exams currently, and also we provide like free resources for college admissions as well. And that includes ACT and SAT support. So that's kind of like what we're focusing on now. We have like we have like a bunch of tools for students to study, and that's kind of like what we've been doing for the last 4 years and what we've been building over here.
Awesome. And I've also seen that you guys are kind of expanding into like mental health and other areas for students.
Yeah, I think we've kind of found ways to just like embed that as we go. Obviously, we are not mental kind of health experts, and so we can't make those claims. But I think like there's just things that students need to know that will just make them less stressed, right? Like as a student yourself, you can just think of all the things that you wish you would have known then that you do now, right? Like how many times have people said that, and like how many times does that actually come true? Like probably 100% of the time.
Yeah,
And so while we're not like explicitly offering like mental health like curriculum, we are trying to find ways to kind of help motivate students, help kind of build their confidence and kind of help them understand what they're learning and actually like make learning fun, right? Because I think school is probably like one of the biggest stressors in a kid's life, and we're trying to figure out how can we make this just overall experience just that much better.
sure. I think that's a really great addition to just Fiveable. Like personally, I do love it, but like I feel like adding a mental health aspect is really, really important for students.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten a lot of like just random people reaching out saying like, I just love the thing you have in your footer about students, like about giving students a place to go if they need somebody to talk to, right? Like we've had people show up in interviews like that's what like drew me. It was like you really care about students, and I think it's something that we're pretty proud of.
Awesome. And to kind of shift to some random icebreakers, I was
Mhm.
curious, is there anything that's really niche that you're curious about or like really passionate about?
Oh man, I think right now it's I'll have a couple things related to work. It's what is the impact of AI on education, and like what will that change fundamentally about like how students learn, right? Because if you think about homework,
Yeah.
a student can just like go into one of these like AI generators, type in a homework response, right? But it's like that doesn't teach you that doesn't actually teach you anything. You know, you're just like essentially copy and pasting from AI instead of like other people now, right? And it's still plagiarism, even though it's AI. And so it's like what are the long term impacts of AI on that, and how will Five will kind of have to change because of that?
Hmm.
Yeah. And is it really about content generation anymore? Is it about content generation on the student side is like writing homework, right? Writing a free response question, things like that. And on the company level, it's like how do we incorporate AI into like the work that we do to make things more efficient or anything like that? So that's kind of like what I've been thinking about. Um, Personally, I'm always looking to uh, learn and make more cheesecake recipes. And so if you know any, like let me know. But I have a really awesome caramel. It's like a bourbon caramel. It's like a like caramelized. I always forget how to say it. It's like a caramelized bourbon pecan pie cheesecake, and that's probably like the best one I've made. And so
Huh.
I need to find something that will top that.
You
So
could actually try,
yeah,
my mom makes these like cheesecakes in a jar. So you could try
yeah.
like rerouting from cheesecake to like a different form of cheesecake, you know? It could be
Oh,
fun.
that's true. I do like switching that up a little bit. So um I just don't know how to make them smaller. So
Yeah.
y'all if y'all got tips, let me know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. And then I was curious about like the AI that you mentioned.
Mhm.
I was curious how you felt about like the future of real education and standardized testing with like AI and ChatGPT specifically, like really becoming prevalent.
Yeah, I think it'll force a conversation around like do students fundamentally understand what is happening, and like do they understand the content in front of them, right? I
Hmm.
think with standardized testing it does get at that a bit, but I think like we have to make sure that we're even more on top of like the skills that we're trying to teach students so they can kind of like answer those kinds of questions on future tests, right? Or we don't even know like what future test questions will even look like, right? I don't mean to stress any students out that are listening, but like what if there's like new question formats that come because of this, or like question prompts, right? um and and like how will AI kind of impact the delivery of that content in a way that students will actually grasp it better or worse, right? Like there's still a lot of experimentation that needs to be done, and kind of a lot of learnings around like how that will impact students on the ground level.
Hmm.
But I think like that's what we personally feel like we are most we're best set up to do right now, is like how can we learn everything we need to know right now and kind of keep that mindset going along the way, right? Because things will keep changing, and instead of like being scared of those changes, we just have to adapt to them really fast and then communicate how those changes impact students. And so that's as far as I got with like the future of it. But I think that um, there's so many articles that are being written right now that are being written really fast. I don't know if it's done with AI or not, but there will be there will be like some fundamental change coming, and in a big way, I feel, especially if students are like can just type in a question, they can get an answer right away, right? How does that actually impact like even teaching? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. I actually personally I believe that like schoolwork and stuff might shift more towards testing because now
Mhm.
like with take home assignments, like any time that you're not in like an educational space where they can't really manage like what resources you're using, I think that those assignments will definitely become less valuable if
Mhm.
even like offered anymore, just
Yeah.
because now you can just pop it into a bot and it'll do it. But like in-person testing and like standardized tests, I think could have like more weight put on them just because you're not really able to do that at least yet.
Right. Yeah. I know that in college, like in high school, you pretty much have it like laid out for you, but in college, like you kind of like have to navigate it on your own, right? It's like here's this class. In the class, you'll get an announcement of like when the test is, and then like from there to then, it's like, oh shoot, like what do I even do to like get ready, right? And I think like that part will be interesting to me in terms of like what students are seeking out. But yeah, I think you're right in terms of is there going to be more emphasis on in person or like online assessments? Probably for sure, and what those will look like will definitely change. Um, yeah, I guess like it's such like still a new conversation that I'm still trying to come to terms with it. But um, from what I've observed so far, I think I don't think like coming up with an original thought or idea is as important for students learning as much as just like actually understanding it, right? And
Sure.
so
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then also kind of looking back at like the founding of Fiveable, I'm curious about, well, first, like the name Fiveable, is that because of AP scores, like that you were able to
yep.
achieve a five?
Yeah, Amanda's mom actually came up with that. She's like, "What about Fiveable?" And I was like, "Kind of perfect, right?"
Yeah.
It's like we do cover all the AP sports, but like we want all students to know that we're also looking out for them. And so like while our current focus is AP, it's like, well, once we kind of like get our site to the way we want it, like what comes after AP even, right? Is international,
Mhm.
is it international exams, I mean, is it just general high school subjects? Those are like questions that we're thinking about too.
Yeah. And then I was also curious, like, what the motivation behind founding Fiveable was. And then
Mhm.
also, I read that you founded on Reddit, and that's how you got
Yeah.
involved. And so I'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah. So Amanda was a teacher in Oakland, and essentially, I've told the story a bunch of times, but it always feels like a new story or like that happened yesterday. But Amanda was a teacher in Oakland a couple of years back, and I don't know, I don't think she felt supported by her school in terms of like just the resources or like even the expectations they had for the kids, right? I think like it's easy to work in a place like Oakland and then have like a school not truly understand what you need in terms of like these are more urban schools, and more diverse schools, and so it's like the needs can vary really very widely, right? So it's like how do you address those things?
Mhm.
I don't think Amanda felt set up for success while she was there in terms of just like having what she needed, and so she felt like she could make a bigger impact. um on her own, or at least like out independent of a school, and then she can reach more students through tech, right? It's like, of course you can. Like students are online everywhere, and so it's
Yeah.
like, what can we build to help support not just the students in my classroom, but like students everywhere? And I think like that was kind of like the initial kind of starting, or the initial like kind of founding story, and then and that was back in April of 2018. The dates just get really blurry after a certain point. um, but after 2018, after April 2018, she got like an initial like $20,000 grant, and then from Beta Boom, like one of our very first investors that focus on like diverse kind of women entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
So she took that initial seed money and then um, put up a post, a really awesome post about like, hey, I'm starting this like startup house. We're focused on solving these like big problems in education. We're trying to like democratize education. Like that was our like party line earlier earlier in our journey. But um, around the fall of 2018, that's when I reached out and saw that post, and I was like, dang, like I would love to do all of that. And yeah, we met on Reddit. I was at that time I was like freelancing. I was also like houseless at the moment, so I was kind of like surfing from house to house, just like I was like, this does not feel great. And I think like the idea of like working together and a people who think like me, plus like working on this big problem of education, I think really intrigued me. So that's when I like reached out to Amanda. We had like a call for like, I don't know, over an hour maybe. And then we're like, should we move in together? And then we just made the decision to do that. And she used the seed money to some of that seed money to like set up this apartment to like bring us in, all that fun stuff. I was still working in a restaurant too and during this time, and so it's kind of like juggling Fiveable, and then so at a certain point you're like, I can only do one, right?
Yeah.
um, and so at a certain point, like once I felt all in, like I was able to just that point was probably like moving to Madison, um, because Madison, we got to a point where the company had grown, like our traffic grew like crazy. I was in charge of growth at the time, and um, once we hit this like certain growth point, like we started getting more interest, and um, Generator in Madison, Wisconsin was like one of our biggest supporters. We got accepted into their accelerator program. We beat out like 1,000 companies to like get in there because they only accept like 5 or 6 companies at
Mhm.
a time. Um, and yeah, that changed everything. And I was like, once that happened, I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay here and like try to figure this out as long as it takes, even if we are not paying ourselves, even if we aren't making money, like all those things, right? I think to work in education, like accept those two things like really early on.
Yeah. That's awesome. Wow. And then kind of like early on, I'm curious what your like favorite moments were. Just like maybe generator coming along and that
Yeah.
happening, or really any of your moments that were really impactful for you.
I think it was just like the constant like affirmation that we were getting from people that we were on the right track, right? And then you definitely know when you're not on the right track because you don't get that as much, right? And so like just like seeing how the world reacts to the thing that you put out is always like one like terrifying. I'm sure you feel that way, or you're going to feel that way with this podcast that you're doing. um and then I think just like being on the ground, like just working with students, kind of like building the support for them was always just like a big point of interest for me. And probably the most impactful and rewarding, I think, is because like I talk to students who use Fiveable, whether it's like they're just using it or they come back years later, or they're like looking for a job, right? It's like we've had that like dozens of times where that's where we will hire the students that have used our platform in some way. I think that kind of makes for like the best relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then it's just like working with the team, right? And building a company. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing every single day, but it's like you kind of figure that out, and you kind of like it's all about like building more confidence in the things that you feel like should happen, and like decreasing confidence where you can, and so you can deprioritize, right? I'm sure as a person you're starting out, you're gonna be like, what do I even focus on right now? Like what is gonna be the most impactful to my growth? And then like what can I punt to later, right? It's like I think that part of like the professional development has been helping me figure out like you should do this now, you should do that later, and you shouldn't do this at all. And like that was always my problem growing up, was like I've always wanted to do everything because I'm a very curious person. And so naturally, business has a way of just like business is good, but it also has a way of like kind of like really like putting a cap on what you should be spending your time on, which is a positive thing. At first, I took it as like a bad thing. Like, man, business really destroys creativity, but it can help you become more creative too in terms of like how you think about your solutions, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And then I was also curious, like, what advice you would give to someone that's starting a project like Fiveable or really just starting a company at all?
Sorry, what was the first part of that question?
Oh, like what advice you'd give to someone like starting a project like Fiveable or like a company at all in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the things I wish I knew. Or I could have just like read up more, which I recommend doing. But I think talking to founders does the same thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think like talk to more founders, right? People who have launched their own projects, even whether they never like launched as a company or if it's just an idea. Like, how do they talk to more people who have that kind of mindset, right? Who have like a founder's mindset of like, I see a problem, I'm going to try to put together a solution.
Mhm.
Those are the people that will move you ahead the fastest in terms of like the things you have to know, the things that are important to know.
Yeah.
And then my other advice is just like you don't have product market fit. You don't understand like how big your idea is going to get. And so the the first thing that we did was just like we did everything we could that we felt like students would need, and like that really turned out well for us, right? Like we've supported over 15 million students in just like 5 years. Um, and that was a lot of that was when we didn't even have money, right?
Mhm.
Because that was the one of the constraints I'm talking about is like finances, right? It's like um I only have so much money. Like, what can I do with this? And that's where prioritizing and figuring out what you need to do now versus later makes the most sense. And I think that's where most people need the most help is like, okay, I have this idea. Like, everybody has ideas. That's easy. But do you have a good idea? Right. That's the hard part. And it's like understanding what problem you're trying to solve. How are you going to present a solution that's different and that's unique and that it provides value, most importantly, to your users, right? So like really understanding what you're setting out to learn about your audience, about your company, like that's what you should be doing right now. And I guess I'm saying that to you to you more specifically because you're kind of starting off in this new adventure, but like in general, like that's always a good place to start is like figure out the problem space and then figure out, okay, how like what about my strengths makes me best fit to solve this problem, and then like what can I bring to this problem that hasn't been thought of before or hasn't been addressed in this way that is still providing value, right?
That's a really interesting perspective. And I think really good advice in general. Like I've heard from other founders that really finding out like your why you're doing it, is like one of the most important things that you can do early on.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was gonna be my second thing actually, and this is what I tell the generator companies that I mentor is like really understanding your why, because the why is what will keep you grounded, right? I think the why is what kept me grounded in Fiveable. I was like, even though I don't want to lead the company, like I do want to build it and I do want to like create things for students. And I think um that why was that my why of like why I want to be here. Um, in those situations, you can like easily just leave, right, and look for something else. But like for me, like that wasn't an option. It was more just like, where do I see myself best fit to serve the most students, and like creating stuff for them, like technically and logistically, is the place that I'm strong at, the area that I'm strongest at, and so um, that's why I was able to make that decision really easily. And when people ask me, why'd you change? Like most people like try to work up, right? I'm like, I'm trying to work down, and a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, why? And that's why like I want to help the most students possible and like where I'm best fit according to like my skills and what I believe to be strongest at, like just building the things and letting somebody else lead the thing, right?
All right. Well, thank you, Ton. It was really great having you on, and thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Aaron. Really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to like what comes out of this. So